These are the German forests in which the last desperate battles of the Second World War were fought. Here, among the chaos and darkness, the Allies obliterated Nazism. Out of the senseless fragments of violent human experience, they forged a coherent memory of the war. It is the memory of the good war, which we have lived with for 50 years. But in the process, the victors buried those fragments that didn't fit. They were suppressed even in the minds of thousands of men who fought among these trees.
The dream started with walking down a canal bank between trees, among trees. And suddenly I'm lying on my face and bullets are flying around me and mortar shells are falling. And someone is dying and shouting on his mother, for his mother. And I woke up and I wrote it out. And as I wrote it, the details started coming back to me and I realized this was no dream. I was just reconstructing the actual episode that happened, as it was. And that was the beginning of memory coming back.
Out of the carnage in Europe 50 years ago, the Allies selected certain memories. They used them to build the official version of the Good War. This film is about how that happened. It tells why certain memories had to be buried and forgotten because they contradicted the optimism of the big historical picture.
The fault of the big picture is that it omits evil. It's all good. We won the war, therefore we must have deserved to win it. Therefore we are wonderful people without fault, and so on. Right there you can read the history of modern Europe and the Allies' continued relation with it. A lot of the Cold War is based upon that. American behavior in Vietnam, which assumes that anybody who's opposed to communism must be wonderful, you see, and who's astonished when the people opposing communism prove to be as wicked as the communists. I'm thinking of Lieutenant Calley and people like that. Yes, it has a lot to do with post-war assumptions and post-war national behaviors, I would say, that great big picture, which so conveniently omits individual evil.
The story begins 6 years before the war, when the Nazis came to power in Germany. They promised to end the chaos the country had suffered since 1918. Hitler's right-hand man was Hermann Goering. Like many of the Nazis, Goering was convinced that a new Germany would arise only if it reawakened the glories of the past. In the forest north of Berlin, Goering began building a vast palace. Today, this is all that is left of Karin Hall.
Es war ein Haus von Göring, Karin Hall. Hier stand mal ein großes Haus, ein Schloss. Schade, dass das gesprengt ist geworden. Das war nicht sehenswert. Und jetzt alles eine Ruine.
Goering designed Karin Hall to evoke the power and splendor of Germany's distant past. The marble halls were lined with tapestries that displayed the images and symbols of the Teutonic knights of old.
Und an den Wänden waren auch Teppiche. Ja. Ich habe immer noch den einen in Erinnerung mit den großen Teufel da drauf. Mit den Teufelbier da in der so, neue Galerie. In der Galerie. Oh.
Nazis like Goering look back to ancient German history, to a time when knights rode through the forests of northern Europe. The knights were powerful figures who had established political and intellectual supremacy. The Nazi aim was to conjure up this noble past, to mark the start of a new era.
They tried to give a new memory, a new history, a new past. There were big parades and big marches and big Inszenierungen, big things they made in the town to bring the history back. You would have got to believe that you are coming from a very important past and going to a very important future. The whole Third Reich was a theater of memories that picked together from the past whatever was good and interesting for them, forgetting the rest, and they mixed them in a way never seen before. And there was a fascinating cocktail of a never-happened history.
Ihr Waldboden solle Schätze vergangener Jahrtausende bergen. Konnte ihre Mutter Erde eindringlicher zu ihr sprechen. Ein Wunder, welches sie und uns stolz macht, der Rasse anzugehören, die bereits vor Tausenden von Jahren auf derart hoher Kulturstufe stand.
But the Nazis' project was far more than a simple reawakening of history. Their aim was to use the power of the past to transform those they governed into new and better people.
This is the former Congress building, Congress Hall. The Nazis planned it for their congresses, for the sub-organizations of the party rallies. It was planned for 50 to 60,000 people here to listen to the speeches of the big Nazi leaders. It's a mix between Babylonian, Egypt, medieval Greek, Roman architecture. The impression they were trying to give was of a very far-away history, very mighty, very important, very big history.
The Nazis were deliberately manufacturing a mythical image of Germany's past in order to control its people. They believed that democracy and socialism had failed because individuals, when left to themselves, became corrupt and barbarous. Only the nation had the power to control this evil. It could pull people together and transform their wickedness into a new, powerful force. The giant Nazi rallies were an expression of this ideal. Dwarfed by the symbols of the country's mighty past, individuals would lose themselves in the vast sea of the nation's soul.
Da hat man am Abend alle Lichter ausgelöscht und dann waren außen etwa 130 Scheinwerfer, die man im Krieg für die Flugzeuge gebraucht hat. Die hat man so aufgestellt, dass die ganz senkrecht nach oben gegangen sind. Und das war nun so, als wenn dieses ganze Stadion von einer Lichtwand eingehüllt wäre. Das hat also einen fantastischen Eindruck gemacht.
By the end of the 1930s, Germany had become a coherent, directed society. It also represented a fundamental challenge to the ideas of democracy. Individual rights and reason no longer mattered. Instead, the nation was to be supreme. And one of the most fervent believers in this new faith was Hermann Göring.
He believed in the necessity to support the lasting life and domination of the German, as you might call it, nation state, the German body national. Göring said once, and that was years earlier, when he was Prime Minister of Prussia, he made a statement to the effect, I am the police. Every bullet that leaves the muzzle of a police weapon is my bullet. If that be murder, then I am a murderer.
Strange feeling. I cannot describe it and hardly declare what it is, but this mix of history gave them a destiny for eternity, the last step to the promised land.